Hey yo everyone, this is a follow-up to the Glamour Table Datapack showcase from a couple of weeks ago. In this episode, I'm going to go over some bug fixes and changes that have happened to the Datapack since that original video came out, and then do a technical deep dive of how the resource pack works to allow for texture editing in-game. So the first change to the Datapack is I have completely removed tridents from being able to have their texture edited. The next fix was to maces. In my left hand here, I have a vanilla mace. In my right hand, I have what a mace looked like in the original version of the Datapack. You can see it's a lot smaller than it should be, and the colors are off. That's because the colors are from a vanilla trident and not a vanilla mace. So it has been updated to now look like this when you apply the smithing recipe. So it looks, a lot more like a vanilla mace. There's been an update to the Glamour Table texture. This little eye from the creaking heart is a bit more defined. And when you have an item in the table, it now lights up to indicate that there's an item there. This might be useful if you, using slime, completely erase a texture. You can know that there's still something in the table. If you are in the latest snapshot, there has been an item duplication recipe added for duplicating canvases. If you take a painted canvas and combine it with a painting, you get 4 copies of the canvas out of that. One painting quadruples a canvas, basically. The final change is more of a performance thing. So if I turn on hitboxes here, you can see that currently there are just 1 hitbox per table. If I put an item in, there's suddenly a lot more hitboxes. These are the interaction entities that are used for knowing which pixel you are trying to paint. Previously, these were just on all the time, which could lead to a bunch of lag if you had multiple tables set up at the same time. So now if there's not an item in them, they don't have those 256 extra interaction entities. So that is it for the changes and bug fixes. So with that, I will get into a technical explanation, starting with the new item model format. The changes that made this datapack possible were introduced in snapshot 24W45A, and this snapshot completely reworked how item models work. So the first hint of this, when you're scrolling through the change notes, is this note that custom model data has changed. So instead of it being a single value like it used to be, it now has 4 arrays of values. So you can pass floats, Boolean flags, strings, and colors as custom model data to textures. And then more importantly, down in the resource pack version, we have this new format has been introduced for describing item models. When I was first reading these change notes, I wasn't entirely sure what was happening, just because there's talk of the models and tint types right away, and all these different model types. And so what I tend to do when I'm kind of confused by these release notes is I'll go to the vanilla data or assets folder. So this is the vanilla assets for Minecraft 1.21.4. You can get to it in the versions folder in your main Minecraft folder location in app data. And it's just inside a jar file, which can be unzipped, are all of these default vanilla values. So this is basically just a resource pack that has everything in the vanilla game in it. And here we have this new items folder, which has new item models for every item in the game. Most of these are like this acacia boat item, where it just references a single item model, because these are still called item models for some reason. So most of them are fairly straightforward, but there are more complicated things that can be done. For example, with potions, we see an example of the tint being added, where it gets a color from the potion component on the item, and then uses that to change the color of the texture. Or with the fishing rod, we can have a Boolean condition where we look if the fishing rod has been cast already. If it has, we use this texture, and if not, we use this texture. And then as a more complicated example, we have the bundle, which kind of starts to show all the different things you can do with this. So at the outer layer, we have a selection, which is sort of like a Boolean, but you pass it a string, and you check against multiple string values to see if it matches. So here we pass it the display context, and if we are looking at it in the GUI, we go up to this composite model, or this model that has multiple parts. Otherwise, we go just to a simple bundle item model. Inside this one, we have a conditional that looks if we're selecting an item from the bundle. So this means we've moused over it and have started scrolling through its contents. If we have, we show this composite model, which just draws all of these models in order on top of each other. And if not, we just show the item bundle model again. And then in this composite model, we have a back texture, the item they've selected, and the front texture. So as you can see, the item models can get rather complicated rather quickly, which is why I have put together this monster of an item model that has 256 entries in a composite model. So this is the base item model used by most of the custom textures with the Datapack. There's a handful of other ones here. The only difference between these is how the item gets scaled, because the maces are slightly larger, the paintings have to be slightly larger, items versus tools are held at a different angle in hand, things like that. But all of these are basically the same. They just point to different item models down here. If I do some auto formatting, make it a bit easier to read, you can see that each of these models is basically identical. The only difference is the index here and here, and then which specific model we point to on this line. But other than that, each entry is the same. Each entry starts with a conditional, where we look at the Boolean flags in the custom model data, and this will control whether the pixel is visible or not. So if it's true, we move on to this model, otherwise we use this empty model. If it's true, in this model, we just have a base model that points to a single texture, and then we give it a tint based off of the colors array in custom model data. So putting this together, we have 256 individual textures. Each of them is given a color based on the custom model data, and then made invisible or visible based on custom model data. And putting that together, we can make any 16 by 16 texture just by setting the custom model data to have the colors for all of those pixels. And then down here, under the item models, these all just point to a single texture. And then under the textures, you can see each texture is just a single pixel that is turned on. And that's basically it for the resources that control the custom textures. There's a handful of resources here for I have textures for the work tables. So the Glam canvas has the painting table, this has the Glamour table, and there's also textures for the paint brushes. But that's just the vanilla brush texture split in two, and then half of it changed to white so that when you dye it, the color updates appropriately. And other than that, there's not anything else really in this resource pack. It's mostly just this one massive file and then a bunch of little tiny files that just point to a single pixel. That is it for this resource pack overview. I'm still working on some behind-the-scenes optimizations for the Datapack part. So as soon as those are finished, I'll be releasing an overview of how the Datapack works. But from seeing the bunch of interaction entities, I think most of you who know Datapacks can kind of figure out how most of that goes together just from seeing that. I've also been experimenting with the multi-pack format that Minecraft has for their data packs. This allows me to have a single data pack that works on the latest release version of 1.21.4 and the latest snapshot, which is currently 25W06A. And it allows me to switch out recipes so it has the correct component format depending on the version, or I can have the new recipe I mentioned for duplicating a canvas. Even though that doesn't work in release, I can still have it in the data pack, and it just gets ignored. So yeah, that is it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something about the new item format, and I hope to see you all in the future.